Hello, my name is Dr. Jacqueline, and I'm with DTP-Leadership Group. And this is my podcast. It's number 52. And it's a way to provide even further information about critical race theory to you. So it's titled, Has Critical Race Theory Ever Been Taught in a Elementary, Middle, or High School? That's the accusation the Republicans are making. That's the reason they're banning certain things in schools. The truth about critical race theory and how it shows up in the classroom is what I'm going to present in this podcast. Podcasts 48, 49, 50, and 51 all give you different information about the fight over critical race theory or C.R.T. I've saved you a lot of time. I've utilized many resources to tell you what a C.R.T. is and how it's being misused. I think it's very important for all of us Americans to understand what C.R.T. is and what the Republicans are doing to gain white support in fringe groups that want a reason to reject anything that is not something they believe. I have given you the detail on how Trump and Republicans lash out concerning CRT to build their case, and they use children to do that. Because what they've said is these children are being indoctrinated with liberal ideas. The truth of it is, the immature and illiterate use of CRT should really, I think, be an embarrassment to all Republicans who've supported laws that are attempting to change our history. And not only that, what our students need to know, understand, and deal with that they are eliminating in our history so they will know what really has happened in our country in the past and even today. Now, critical race theory has a great deal to offer us in the United States, but how to understand systemic racism and other isms. The Education Week, in the article, What is Critical Race Theory and Why is it Under Attack, by Stephen Sawchuk, published on May 18, 2021, gives another view of CRT that I have not presented before. Since it addressed the attacks on CRT, that it is a liberal theory and is taught in elementary, middle, and high schools. I'm going to use this article to talk more about CRT and then give the facts about CRT's use in higher education. It refutes the claim that Republicans are making, and they do not understand the use CRT has in higher education, not in K through 12. So, what does critical race theory say? Stephen Sawchuk makes it clear that CRT is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that the race is a social construct and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. And he says, quote, the events of the past decade increased public awareness about things like housing segregation, the impact of criminal justice policies in the 1990s, and the legacy of enslavement on Black Americans. Republicans adding children and schools into the discussion created volatility, which they wanted to do to spread their extreme conservative ideology. He gives a good example of racism when he writes, and again, quote, in the 1930s, government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risks, often explicitly due to the racial composition of inhabitants. Banks sequentially refused to offer mortgages to Black people in these areas. Today, those same patterns of discrimination live on through facially race-blind policies like single family zoning that prevents the building of affordable housing in advantaged majority white neighborhoods and thus stifles racial desegregation efforts. C.R.T. also has ties to other intellectual uh, currents, including the work of sociologists and literary theorists who study links between political power, social organization, and language. And its ideas have been used since they inform other fields like humanities, social sciences, and teacher education. Sawchuk provides an answer to this question. Does critical race theory say all white people are racist? And his response is, isn't there racist too? The theory says that racism is a part of everyday life. So people, white or non-white, who don't intend to be racist can nevertheless make choices to fuel racism. Some critics claim that the theory advocates discriminating against white people in order to achieve equity. Fundamentally, though, the disagreement springs from different concepts of racism. C.R.T. puts on emphasis on outcomes, not merely on individuals' own beliefs, and it calls on these outcomes to be examined and rectified. Among lawyers, teachers, policymakers, and the general public, there are many disagreements about how precisely to do these things, and to what extent race should be explicitly appealed to or referred to in the process. So that's the conflict we have. It gives a helpful illustration. In a 2007 U.S. Supreme Court school assignment case on whether race could be a factor in maintaining diversity in K-12, Chief Justice John Roberts' opinion famously concluded, the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. But during the oral argument, then Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, it's very hard for me to see how you can have a racial objective, but a non-racial means to get there. Now, Sawchuk goes on in the next section that he talks about in his article, what he titles, What Does Any of This Have to Do with K-12 Education? And he states, quote, scholars who study critical race theory in education look at how policies and practices in K-12 education contribute to persistent racial inequalities in education and advocate for ways to change them. Among the topics they've studied are racially segregated schools, the underfunding of majority Black and Latino school districts, disproportionate disciplining of Black students, barriers to gifted programs and selective admission high schools, and curricula that reinforces racist ideas. Critical race theory is not synonymous with critical relevant teaching, which emerged in the 1990s. This teaching approach seeks to affirm students' ethnic and racial backgrounds and is intellectually rigorous. But it's related in that one of its aims is to help students identify and critique the causes of social inequality in their lives. Many educators support, to one degree or another, cultural relevant teaching and other strategies to make schools feel safe and supportive for Black students and other underserved populations. The students of color make up the majority of school-age children, but they don't necessarily identify these activities as CRT related. Now, he further says, while some district officials have issued mission statements, resolutions, or spoken about changes in their policies using some of the discourse of CRT, it's unclear to what degree educators are explicitly teaching the concepts or even using curriculum materials or other methods that explicitly draw on them. For one thing, scholars say much scholarship on CRT is written in academic language or published in journals not easily accessible to K through 12 teachers. He further asks a question: what is going on with these proposals to ban critical race theory in schools? He addresses the vagueness of the bills written. It's also unclear whether these new bills are constitutional or whether they're restricting free speech. And he says it would be very difficult, extremely difficult, in any case, to police what is done on hundreds of thousands of classrooms. But social studies educators fear that such laws could have a chilling effect on teachers who might self-censor their own lessons out of concern from parent or administrative complaints. The laws could also become a tool to attack other pieces of curriculum, including ethnic studies and active civics, an approach to civic education that asks students to research local civic problems and propose solutions. And here is something that I think is very important that he presents in his paper. As English teacher Mike Stern told Chalk Beat, Tennessee, about the new law, he said, history teachers cannot adequately teach about the Trail of Tears, the Civil War, and the Civil Rights Movement. English teachers will have to avoid teaching almost any text by an African American because many of them mention racism to various extents. The next article it has multiple references in it. So if you ever want my script, I'll be happy to give it to you. You can contact me at Jacqueline, JACKALYN, at D like dog, T like Tom, P like Paul, leadership.com. But here's what the EdPost staff have to say on May 5th, 2021. And the article is entitled Explained, capitalized, semicolon, the truth about critical race theory and how it shows up in your child's classroom. And here are the quotes from this article. In a perfect world, educational equity would ensure that all students have access to high quality curriculum and instruction and funding. Well, we don't live in a perfect world. So racial inequality manifests in a number of ways in American education. And here are some of the examples given. The predominant curriculum centers the white narrative and tends to include the history and lived experiences of people of color as secondary. So what they're really doing is they're centering on white narratives and they exclude the history and lived experiences of people of color. So I want to really make that clear. And the second thing is instruction often takes a deficit-based approach, characterizing students of color as being in need of remediation rather than appreciating their talents and giftedness. The third point, school discipline policies disproportionately impact students of color, often compromising their educational outcomes. And number four, school funding inequities persist. Predominantly white schools receive $23 billion more in funding than districts serving students of color. To me, that is really something. 23 billion more funding in white districts rather than in students of color districts. So this article goes on to say CRT provides a relevant research-based framework through which education leaders and policymakers can think about the social construct of race and the impact of racism on students of color. This framework also provides educators the tools they need to transform current policies in teaching and learning and to examine the attitudes and biases implicit that they bring into their classrooms. This work allows in educators to teach in ways that are truly anti-racist and are affirming. CRT also allows for the creation of new policies, practices, and curricula that help students think critically about the institutions that shape their lives and to develop their own affirmative racial identities, which is important for all students. One of the sections to this article is entitled, Why is Critical Race Theory Important in K through 12 Education? Here's what the authors say. Critical race theory itself is not being taught in K through 12 schools, unless you're talking about some very advanced students, and they would be at a college, level academically. However, the research and scholarship that inform CRT have greatly shifted how many education experts view our school systems. CRT has been helpful to education leaders as to seek to disentangle the systems in our communities and schools that oppress students of color and hinder their ability to thrive. So by starting from the well-established fact that academic proficiency is not related to the color of one's skin, critical race theory pushes policymakers to look beyond the individual students and instead at the system around them, shifting our language from achievement gap or education debt or opportunity gap is one step on the journey. In what ways have our systems of education, health, and housing blocked opportunities for Black and Brown children? How do we eliminate these barriers? So in conclusion, I would like to say this about this podcast. I provided you with many references to show what the real issues are. It is clear that CRT is not being taught in K through 12. The one exception, which seldom occurs, is named in the last article that a few advanced students are learning about CRT. However, these students are functioning on a college level academically. So any college student has the capacity to develop critical thinking and make their own decisions about what they're learning. Both articles show us the value of CRT for teachers. Both articles provide comments and references to how the Republicans' use of CRT is politically motivated. Inappropriate how they are applying CRT, it shows their complete lack of understanding of CRT. Republicans are blatantly using CRT to destroy the truth about our history, our educational process. Studying the CRT theory can help you and I to move toward lessening and then eliminating racism in our country. Thank you for listening.